I never planned to walk through that door empty-handed. I planned to walk through it broken. But I hadn't even touched the handle when 4 words stopped me cold. She's useless to us now. That was my mother's voice, slipping through walls too thin to hide the truth. No hesitation in it. No warmth. Just math. And what I heard next would tell me everything about the family waiting on the other side of that door. What about the paperwork? My brother's voice came next, tight with worry. If she won't sign, we're finished. A pause. Then my father, calm and certain in a way that chilled me. Then we make her sign. She owes us that much. I stood in that hallway, suitcase in hand, 10 years of distance pressing on my chest like a physical weight. I hadn't even stepped inside yet, and they had already priced me, already decided what I was worth and what I wasn't. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 41. 3 weeks before I stood in that hallway, I was promoted to Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. My family doesn't know that. They don't know about the ceremony in Norfolk, the sky so clear it almost didn't look real. They don't know about the handshake from a man I had admired my entire career. Or the exact moment those stars settled onto my shoulders and the weight of them became permanent. They don't know any of it because I never told them. And standing in that hallway listening to my own blood plan how to use me, I understood why I never had. I shifted the suitcase in my grip. It was old, scuffed on purpose, the handle cracked just enough to sell a story. I'd planned every detail of how I'd look that day. Plain clothes, bare hands, nothing that hinted at rank or success. Just a woman who'd lost everything. I was going to tell them I'd been forced out of the Navy. I'd rehearsed it on the drive over, practiced the catch in my voice, the way my eyes would drop just enough to make the lie believable. I wanted to see what they'd do with a daughter who had nothing left to offer. But by the time I reached that door, I didn't need to test anything. The truth was already spilling out on its own. We can't keep covering for him forever, my mother said inside. The bank is already asking questions. He just needs more time, my brother shot back. Once this deal goes through. It's not going through, my father cut in. Not without her signature. A beat of silence. Then my mother, quieter now, colder. She's coming back today, isn't she? That's what you said. Yeah, my brother answered. But if she shows up with nothing, we'll remind her where she came from. She doesn't get to walk away from this family, just because it's inconvenient. Something in my chest pulled tight. Not shock. Recognition. This wasn't new, it was just finally visible. I closed my eyes and let the pieces fall into place. Every phone call that ended the second I said I couldn't send money, every holiday spent alone on base while they smiled for photos without me, every achievement met with silence. And still, some foolish part of me had kept hoping. Not for an apology, just for something real. A lull in their voices pulled me back. Footsteps, the clink of a glass on a counter. The ordinary sounds of a life I'd been missing from for years. I took one slow breath and knocked. The sound cracked louder than I expected against the quiet hallway. Inside, everything stopped. Then footsteps, and the door opened to my mother, her face shifting from confusion to something colder, calculation, the same thing I just heard in her voice. Eleanor, she said, blinking like she was recalibrating. What are you doing here? I let my shoulders sag just enough. Hi, Mom. Past her, the apartment looked different than the one they always described as struggling. New furniture, a wide TV on the wall, decor that cost more than it should have for people claiming to be broke. My father rose slowly from the couch, eyes sweeping over me. My brother stayed leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, studying me like a problem to be solved. Nobody moved toward me. Nobody hugged me. I stood frozen in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, and let my voice break just slightly. I came back because things didn't work out. Silence stretched long enough to hurt. My mother's eyes dropped to the suitcase, then lifted back to my face. What do you mean? I'm out, Mom, I said, lowering my eyes. They forced me to leave. The lie was finally out in the air. I watched their faces carefully. Every flicker mattered. Shock came first. Then something sharper followed right behind it. You're saying you're discharged? My father asked. I nodded. And your income? Too fast, that question. Gone, I said. My brother let out something close to a laugh. Wow. Didn't see that coming. My mother's hand tightened on the door frame. Eleanor, that's That's a lot. Not I'm sorry. Not are you okay. Just that's a lot. I don't have anywhere else to go, I said, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. I thought maybe I could stay here a few days. Just until I figure things out. Another silence, heavier this time. I watched the wordless exchange between them, my father's glance at my mother, hers at my brother, and I already knew their answer before it came. You should come in first, my mother finally said. Not a welcome. Not quite a rejection either. I stepped inside, and the moment my foot crossed that threshold, something settled in me. Not relief, not comfort, just a quiet certainty that I no longer belonged here. Beneath the calm I'd built over years of service, one truth surfaced clean and sharp. I hadn't come back to find my family. I'd come back to confirm I no longer had one. The apartment smelled exactly as I remembered. Stale coffee, old fabric softener, air that hadn't moved in years. For one disorienting second, it pulled me backward, back to being 18, duffel bag on my shoulder, waiting for someone to ask me to stay. No one had then either. Standing here again, over 2 decades later, nothing essential had changed. My mother shut the door behind me with a click that sounded too final. Put your bag over there, she said, nodding at a strip of floor cluttered with boxes. We've been reorganizing. I set my suitcase down carefully, as if its placement might determine how long I'd be allowed to stay. My father sat back down, stiff and silent. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask what happened. He just watched. My brother Daniel pushed off the counter and circled me slowly, like he was inspecting something he didn't trust. So you're just out like that? It wasn't exactly my choice, I said. That's rough, he said, with no real weight behind the words. Didn't think the Navy would drop you like that. They didn't drop me, I said quietly, letting a little defensiveness slip through. There were complications. My mother exhaled like the whole situation was an inconvenience to her personally. Well, what matters now is what you're going to do next. Not how I felt. Not what I needed. Just what use I could be. I don't know yet, I said. That's why I came here. I just need time. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Time is one thing, Eleanor. But we're not in a position to carry anyone right now. Carry anyone. The phrase landed with precision. I'm not asking you to carry me, I said. Just a place to stay for a few days. A few days turns into a few weeks real fast, Daniel said. A few days, I repeated, calm and unmoved. My mother smoothed it over the way she always did. Let's not jump ahead. She just got here. Then looking me over again. You look tired. I am, I said. That much was true. Not physically, I'd survived worse than a long drive. But something deeper in me had already begun to wear thin. She led me down the narrow hall to a back room. Not really a bedroom anymore, she said, just storage that would do for now. It was dim, lit only by a small window half blocked by boxes, a folding cot against the wall with a thin blanket folded on top. It's a bit cramped, she said without real apology. We've been using it for storage. I stepped inside, taking it in without reaction. Compared to ships and temporary quarters I'd slept in over the years, this was manageable. That wasn't the point. The point was what it represented. It's fine, I said, setting my suitcase at the foot of the cot. We'll talk later about everything else, she said, already retreating, and closed the door behind her. You should start looking tomorrow, my father said abruptly. There's a grocery store hiring 2 blocks over. Okay, I said. Everything else. I sat on the edge of the cot, the frame creaking beneath me, and let myself feel it. Not anger yet, just clarity. Whatever small hope I'd carried on the drive here, the hope that distance had distorted things, that I'd misjudged them, it was gone now. Replaced by something sharper. I pulled out my second phone. Not the one they'd ever see. I didn't call anyone. I just held it, feeling its weight. A reminder of who I actually was, and the world I'd stepped away from just long enough to test a suspicion I'd carried for years. A knock came. I slipped the phone away before answering. Yeah. Daniel leaned in the doorway. Dinner's in 20 minutes. He hesitated, then added, You should probably think about what you're going to do job-wise. I am, I said. He studied me a beat longer, then shrugged. Good. Because things are tight around here. Of course they were. They'd been tight for as long as I could remember. Yet none of it matched the new furniture, the upgraded appliances, the quiet signs of money flowing somewhere. After he left, I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Tight. The word connected itself to everything I'd overheard at the door. The bank, the paperwork, the urgency. Something wasn't right, and it had been moving long before I ever walked back into that apartment. I closed my eyes and let the pieces arrange themselves, the way I'd been trained to over years of service. Watch first, understand second, act last. One thought settled with total certainty. They hadn't just decided I was a burden. They'd been counting on me before I ever arrived. Dinner was quiet in a way that felt rehearsed, like everyone at the table knew something but was waiting for someone else to say it first. My mother moved between stove and table with mechanical efficiency, barely looking at me. My father cut his food into careful, even pieces. Daniel scrolled his phone between bites, glancing up only when the silence stretched too long. No one asked how I was. No one asked what had happened. My story at the door had already been filed away as an inconvenience. I sat straight out of habit and ate slowly, watching more than tasting. Overcooked chicken, canned beans, rice gone clumpy from sitting too long. They won't care about your background, he added. As if the words needed softening. Daniel smirked. Yeah, I don't think they're too strict about Navy discharge records. I let it pass the way I'd let so many comments pass over the years. My mother sat across from me, hands folded briefly before she picked up her fork. We'll help you get back on your feet, she said carefully. Within reason. Within reason. Always conditions. Always invisible lines I'd spent a lifetime trying not to cross. I appreciate that, I said quietly. Another silence settled, heavier. Then Daniel leaned back, chair creaking. So what exactly happened? You don't just get kicked out of the Navy for nothing. It's complicated, I said. Everything's complicated with you, he said, irritation slipping through. You never just say things straight. I met his eyes evenly. Not everything is simple. He held my gaze a moment longer, then looked away, shaking his head like I'd just proven something he already believed. My father set down his fork and finally looked at me directly. We don't need details. What matters is you're here now, and we need to figure out how that fits into everything else. Fits into everything else. Not how they'd support me. Not how they'd help me. Just how I'd fit, like an extra piece forced into a puzzle that had already been assembled without me. I won't be here long, I said. Of course, my mother said too quickly. We all understand this is temporary. Temporary. A word meant to comfort that carried something else underneath. A countdown. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table. There's actually something we've been dealing with, he said, glancing at our parents. Something that might affect all of us. There it was. The shift, subtle but unmistakable. What kind of thing? I asked, keeping my face neutral. My father exhaled, bracing himself. It's a financial matter. We've had some unexpected expenses, my mother added, softer now, almost cautious. Things tied to Daniel's business. It's not a big deal, Daniel cut in. Just timing issues. Cash flow. You know how it is. I did know how it was. And this didn't sound like timing. Sounded like pressure. We've been working on a solution, my father continued. But there are certain documents involved. Formalities. Formalities, I repeated. Just paperwork, he said. Nothing complicated. Daniel leaned in, his tone shifting, less casual now. We might need your help with it. Not even 24 hours, and there it was. I set my fork down carefully. What kind of help? He hesitated, then shrugged. Just signing something. It'll make things easier with the bank. The bank, I said, feeling the pieces click together. My mother jumped in smoothly. It's really nothing serious. Just a way to show stability. Your background, your history, it carries weight. My history. Not my presence. Not me. Just what I represented. I'd have to look at it first, I said. Of course, my father said, a thin edge in his voice now. We're not asking you to do anything blindly. Daniel's earlier confidence returned. It's standard stuff. You'll see. I held his gaze long enough to make him uncomfortable, then nodded once. Okay. The conversation drifted to small talk after that. Groceries, a neighborhood moved, a bill that needed paying. Almost normal. but underneath it something else was still moving, unspoken. After dinner, I excused myself and returned to the back room. The moment the door closed, the air felt different. Less performance, more truth. I sat on the cot, elbows on my knees, replaying their words. Signing something. Helping with the bank. Showing stability. They connected directly to what I'd overheard through the door earlier. If she won't sign, we're screwed. I pulled out the secure phone and unlocked it. Clean screen. No missed calls, no messages. The world I came from didn't chase, it waited. I opened a contact and typed. Need background check on financial filings tied to Hayes' residence. Possible misuse of identity. Discreet. I read it once, then sent it. No emotion, no hesitation. That was how this worked. You don't react. You don't confront. You gather. You confirm. Then you act. I set the phone down and leaned back against the thin pillow, letting the quiet settle. For the first time since arriving, I closed my eyes, not to rest but to think. Whatever they were tangled up in, it wasn't small. And they didn't need me. They needed what I could unlock for them. That made one thing painfully clear. This was never about welcoming me home. This was about being used. Again. The next morning began before sunrise, my body still running on a rhythm built over decades, indifferent to where I slept or what story I was living. I woke in the dim storage room, the same metallic dampness in the air, and for a second forgot where I was, expecting the hum of a ship, the echo of boots on metal. Instead, just silence, and the low drone of an old refrigerator through the wall. I sat up, planted my feet on the cold floor, folded the blanket with the same precision I'd used for years. Control starts with small things. I dressed in yesterday's plain clothes, smoothing them carefully, worn but not careless. Every detail still mattered. The apartment was quiet when I stepped out, both bedroom doors closed. The kitchen told a different story. Dishes left in the sink, a receipt unfolded on the counter, mail stacked precariously against a decorative bowl that didn't belong with anything else in the room. I moved closer, slow and deliberate. The receipt was from a hardware store, the total too high for anything casual. Vague items, tools, something labeled custom fitting. Not groceries. I set it back exactly as I'd found it. The mail stack was thick with official letterheads, financial institutions, legal offices. One envelope showed a bold red stamp peeking out from beneath the others. Final notice. I left it untouched for now and turned to the sink, washing the dishes slowly, letting the simple task give me time to think. Footsteps approached about 10 minutes later. My mother. You're up early, she said, voice still rough with sleep. I'm used to it, I said without turning. She paused at the half-finished dishes. You didn't have to do that. I know. She poured coffee, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. If you're serious about finding work, you should go by the store this morning. Manager gets there around 8. I will. A pause. Daniel mentioned the paperwork last night. Of course he did. I said I'd look at it, I replied, setting the last plate in the rack. It would really help us, she said, softer now. Things have been difficult. I turned off the water and faced her. How difficult? She hesitated. We've had some setbacks. Unexpected ones. That's not an answer. Her expression tightened, the practiced softness slipping. We're managing. But your brother. My brother made decisions, I said evenly. And now there are consequences. Her eyes sharpened. This isn't about blame, Eleanor. This is about family. There it was, the word they always reached for, the shield, the justification. I nodded slightly, conceding nothing but letting her believe I had. I understand. She relaxed. Good. Let her think that. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, dressed, energy sharper than the night before. Morning, he said, grabbing water from the fridge. I've got those documents if you want to go through them. Later, I said. I'm heading out first. For the job. Yes. He studied me again, that same assessing look. Good. Shows initiative. I didn't respond. He didn't need me to, because whatever he was thinking, it had nothing to do with whether I could land a job, and everything to do with whether I'd still be useful to him. I left the apartment into the cool morning air. The city still half asleep. I didn't go to the grocery store. I walked 2 blocks the other way to a small coffee shop on the corner. Quiet inside except for a few early customers and the hiss of the machines. I ordered black coffee and sat near the window. Then I waited. It didn't take long. My secure phone buzzed once. I let myself finish a sip before checking it. One message from my contact, concise and exactly what I expected. Multiple financial filings tied to the apartment address. A loan secured under questionable terms. Irregularities in the documentation. And one line that locked everything into place. Attempted use of third-party identity to establish financial credibility. Subject name appears in draft documentation. My name. Signed but not finalized. Prepared. Ready. Waiting. I leaned back, the cafe noise fading as the information settled. They hadn't just hoped I'd help. They'd planned for it, built around it, counted on it. And when they thought I had nothing left to offer, they'd already started adjusting their plan to fit me in anyway. I locked the phone, finished my coffee slowly, and left cash on the table. The situation was no longer uncertain. It was defined. Back at the apartment, the energy had shifted. The documents were already laid out on the table, waiting. Daniel looked up as I walked in, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Perfect timing. My mother stood nearby, hands clasped, watching with quiet expectation. My father sat rigid in his chair. Everything was set. All they needed was my signature. I stepped to the table, eyes moving over the papers without touching them. Go ahead, Daniel said, sliding them closer. It's all straightforward. I didn't reach for the pen. Not yet. Because I already knew what was on those pages. And more importantly, I knew exactly what they thought I didn't know. I pulled out a chair and sat, letting the silence breathe just long enough to make them uneasy. The stack sat between us, clean, deceptively simple. Go ahead, Daniel said again, lighter now. It's standard stuff. I reached for the top page instead of the pen. The paper felt ordinary in my hands, but the language on it wasn't. Years of reading legal briefings had trained my eyes to move fast. I didn't need long. Refinancing agreement. Third-party guarantor clause. Conditional liability tied to identity verification. I turned the page. More of the same, dressed in neutral phrasing meant to hide its weight. Everything okay? My mother asked softly. I kept reading and didn't answer. Daniel shifted. Like I said, it's just to help stabilize things. Temporary. Temporary. That word again. I turned another page and there it was, my name signed but placed exactly where it needed to be. Prepared. Waiting. A blank line beneath it, waiting for me to make it real. I rested my thumb against the page for a moment, then closed the stack and set it back on the table. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Everything okay? Daniel forced a laugh. It looks worse than it is. I looked up and met his eyes. Who drafted this? He blinked, caught off guard. A guy I know. Lawyer. He handles this kind of thing. What's his name? He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough. That doesn't matter. It matters, I said calmly. My father leaned forward. Eleanor, we're not trying to complicate this. We just need your help. I'm asking a simple question, I said. Who drafted this? My mother stepped in. We can get you that information later. Right now we just need to move forward. Move forward. Another phrase built to skip past the details. I nodded slowly, as if accepting it. And the bank? Daniel answered, more confident now. Regional lender. They're willing to work with us if we can show stability. Stability. I leaned back and folded my hands. And I provide that, I said. Not a question. Daniel smiled, relieved. Exactly. I held his gaze a moment longer, then looked down at the papers again. Do they know I've been discharged? The room shifted, not dramatically but enough. Daniel's smile flickered. They don't need to know everything. So they think I'm still in, I said. My father cleared his throat. It's not about what they think. It's about presenting a consistent picture. I almost smiled because that was exactly what this was. A picture carefully built, with me placed at its center without my consent. I picked the papers back up, flipping to the page with my name. And if I sign this, I become legally tied to the loan. It's just a formality, Daniel said quickly. You're not actually paying anything. That's not what this says. It's standard language, he insisted. For liability, I said. My mother's voice softened, almost pleading. Eleanor, we wouldn't ask you to do anything that would hurt you. I looked at her, really looked, and let the silence stretch, not to provoke, just to see if anything remained behind her eyes that resembled the woman who used to tuck me in at night. I found nothing. I set the papers down again, more deliberately this time. I need time. Daniel's expression tightened. Time for what? It's already been reviewed. Not by me. My father leaned forward, his tone sharpening. We don't have the luxury of waiting, Eleanor. Then you shouldn't have waited for me, I said. The words landed harder than I intended. Or maybe exactly as hard as they needed to. The silence that followed wasn't uncertain anymore. It was tense. Daniel pushed up from his chair, pacing. Look, we're trying to fix a situation here, and you showing up like this, it complicates things. Because I'm not what you expected, I said. He didn't answer because he didn't need to. My mother stepped closer. We thought you'd understand. I do understand, I said quietly. More than they realized. I understood the pressure they were under, the choices that had brought them here, the risk they were trying to push off onto me. What they didn't understand was me. I stood, hands resting on the back of the chair. I'll look at it. And I'll give you an answer. When? Daniel pressed. How soon? I held his gaze. Before you run out of time. That landed. Not enough to expose everything yet, but enough to make him pause. I picked up my suitcase, set it back down. Not to leave, just to remind myself where I stood, and where I didn't belong. Walking back toward the hallway, I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, calculating. The storage room door closed softly behind me, the apartment's noise fading again. I leaned against the wall, breathed out slowly, and pulled out the secure phone. No hesitation this time. Need full legal trace on document origin. Confirm fraud exposure and liability scope. Prepare response options. I sent it, then added time sensitive. I locked the phone, my expression unchanged, because there was no doubt left now. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd built an entire plan on the assumption that I'd never see it, never understand it, and would simply sign. In doing that, they'd made a quiet, permanent mistake. They weren't asking for help. They were asking me to absorb the consequences of something they'd already lost control of. And they still believed I had no idea. The invitation came that afternoon. Not handed to me, not offered with any warmth. Just left on the kitchen counter, slightly off-center. As if I were meant to notice it myself and understand without anyone saying it aloud. A small gathering. Family and close associates. Tonight. No explanation, no question of whether I wanted to be there. Just an assumption. Of course they wanted me there, not as a guest but as leverage. By evening the apartment had transformed. Brighter lights, low music. A table loaded with food that didn't match the tight situation they described just hours earlier. Everything curated. Everything false. I stayed in the back room until I heard the first voices arrive. Laughter, footsteps. The practiced cadence of people performing comfort for each other. Then my mother knocked. They're here, she said, opening the door without waiting. You should come out. I stood and gestured at my clothes. What should I? She looked me over, expression unreadable. That's fine. Not appropriate. Not presentable. Just fine. I followed her into the living room, conversations dipping briefly before resuming. A few faces I recognized, more I didn't. Daniel's people, comfortable here, belonging in a way I never had. I stayed near the edge, watching. Daniel moved through the room easily, shaking hands, laughing on cue. My father stood near a man in a suit I didn't recognize. My mother hovered close, reinforcing whatever story they'd agreed to tell. I picked up a glass of water and listened. Just a temporary setback, my father was saying. We've got everything under control. Of course, the man replied, though he didn't sound convinced. The bank just needs assurance. They'll have it, Daniel added smoothly. We're finalizing the last piece tonight. The last piece. I took a slow sip. A woman beside me glanced over, curious. You must be Eleanor. Daniel's sister. I am. I've heard a lot about you, she said, smiling. The Navy, right? Was, I said. Her smile flickered. Oh, I didn't realize. Most people don't, I said. She excused herself, unsure how to respond, and slipped back into the crowd. Across the room, Daniel was watching me. Not openly, but enough to know he was waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right audience. Came faster than I expected. He clapped his hands once and the room quieted, heads turning toward him. Hey, can I get everyone's attention for a second? My parents stepped closer, their expressions carefully arranged. I just wanted to say thanks for coming tonight, he began. It means a lot, especially with everything we've been working through. A few nods. We've had some challenges, but we're close to turning a corner. And a big part of that is family. There it was, the setup. I stayed still. There's someone here tonight who's been part of this journey, whether she realizes it or not, he said, eyes finding mine. A few heads turned with him. He stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder, light but deliberate. My sister, he said. She's had a rough time recently. Got pushed out of the Navy. Didn't go the way she planned. A ripple moved through the room, surprise, curiosity, judgment. And she came back here, he added. Because at the end of the day, family is what matters. Polite applause. Completely detached from the truth. His hand pressed slightly on my shoulder. Play along. I didn't. I reached up and lifted his hand off, calmly, deliberately. The room noticed. His smile tightened, but he kept talking. Tonight, we're finalizing something important. Something that's going to stabilize everything moving forward. He picked up the documents, holding them up. For those of you who know the situation, you understand what this means. He looked back at me. And Eleanor is going to help us make that happen. There it was, fully out in the open. No more subtlety. No more quiet pressure. Now it was public expectation. My mother stepped closer, voice soft and coaxing. Honey, it's just a formality. We talked about this, my father added. Daniel held the papers out, pen ready. Let's just get it done. I didn't take the pen. I looked at the documents, then at the faces watching me, then back at him, and for the first time since walking into that apartment, I let the silence stretch long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice calm but carrying across the room, I have a question. Daniel's expression flickered. What kind of question? A simple one. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. Who told the bank I was still active duty? The air shifted. The man in the suit straightened. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's fingers curled at her sides. Daniel didn't answer because the question wasn't in his script. For the first time that night, he wasn't in control. No one answered. And in that silence, something important changed, not just in the room but in the way everyone was looking at us. Until that moment, this had been their stage, their story, their version of events. Now there was a crack in it. Small but impossible to ignore. Daniel forced a smile. What kind of question is that? We're in the middle of something here. I know, I said. That's why I'm asking it now. The man in the suit, clearly representing the lender, shifted his attention from Daniel to me. Eleanor, this isn't the time, my father said, low and controlled. It's exactly the time, I said. Because you're asking me to sign something that directly involves that representation. My mother stepped closer, urgent now. We can talk about this later. Just don't make a scene. I'm not making a scene, I said quietly. I'm asking for clarity. The word hung there. Not conflict. Not accusation. Clarity. Daniel's patience cracked. No one told them anything wrong. It's just how the paperwork is structured. That's not what I asked. Then what exactly are you asking? He snapped. I looked at the documents in his hand, then at him. I'm asking who used my name, I said. To establish credibility for a loan I never agreed to support. The room went still, not politely quiet but the kind of silence that pulls the air out of a space. The man in the suit cleared his throat. Is there an issue with the representation provided? He asked, directing the question at me, not Daniel. Daniel turned sharply. No, there's no issue. There is, I said. I didn't raise my voice, didn't move closer. But the word landed harder than anything else said that night. Daniel's head snapped toward me. What are you doing? He hissed. Finishing this, I said. My father's voice dropped, low and dangerous. Eleanor, stop. I didn't even look at him. I turned fully to the man in the suit. My name appears in those documents, I said. In a guarantor position. He nodded slowly, his expression sharpening. Yes, that's correct. I never authorized that. The shift was immediate, not dramatic but unmistakable, the moment a situation moves from informal to legal. His posture changed, his attention narrowing. Are you stating that your involvement has been misrepresented? I'm stating, I said, that I have not agreed to assume any financial responsibility tied to that agreement. Behind me, my mother whispered something under her breath. My father stepped forward, hand half raised as if he could physically stop what was happening. Daniel's voice cut in, sharper now, stripped of confidence. You're overreacting. It's not just anything, I said, turning to him, all softness gone from my voice. Do you understand what happens when someone's identity is used to secure financial credibility without their consent? He didn't answer because now he was starting to understand. I took one slow step forward, not aggressive, just close enough. You didn't need me to sign this, I said quietly. You needed me to exist inside it. That landed harder than anything before it. My father's face drained of color. My mother's composure finally began to crack. And Daniel looked like he was recalculating everything in real time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the other phone. The one they'd never seen. The one that didn't belong to the version of me they thought they understood. I didn't rush, didn't dramatize. I unlocked it, scrolled once, and turned the screen toward the man in the suit. Before you proceed, I said, you might want to review this. He hesitated, then stepped closer and read. His eyes moved fast at first, then slowed, then stopped. When he looked up, his expression had completely changed. What is this? Daniel demanded. The man ignored him, still looking at me. Where did you get this? Verification, I said. Not the full answer, but enough. He straightened, his tone entirely different now. This indicates your identity was included in preliminary filings without finalized authorization. Yes. And that the financial institution was led to believe your status provided additional assurance. Yes. He nodded once, then turned to Daniel. I think we need to pause this. Pause what? Daniel stared at him. The entire process? There's no reason to pause anything, my father said, his voice tight. We're just finalizing. No, the man said, firmer now. We're not. Silence again, heavy, irreversible. My mother's voice broke through, smaller now. Eleanor, please. We can fix this. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time that night, I let her see exactly what was behind my eyes. Not anger, not cruelty, just finality. There's nothing to fix, I said quietly. I reached for the documents, not to sign them, to close them. I set the stack back on the table, aligned neatly, exactly as it had been when I first saw it. Controlled. Precise. Finished. I'm not out of the Navy, I said. The words landed like a fracture line through the room. Daniel blinked. What? I wasn't discharged, I continued. I wasn't forced out. I didn't lose anything. My father stared, his authority dissolving into confusion. Then what? I was promoted. Pause longer than any before it. To Rear Admiral. No one spoke. No one could. The weight of it settled slowly, too large to process all at once. My mother's lips parted without sound. My father's shoulders went rigid. Daniel's expression didn't just change. It collapsed. And in that single moment, everything they thought they understood about me, everything they built this entire plan around, fell apart. I let the silence hold, then took one final step back. From this point forward, I said, my voice returning to its calm, measured register, any communication regarding my name, my identity, or any financial instrument tied to it goes through legal counsel. No anger. No raised voice. Just a line drawn clean and unbreakable. I picked up my suitcase, same worn handle, same quiet weight, but it felt different now. Not like I was carrying something heavy, like I was finally setting something down. I walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Just before I stepped out, I paused, not to look back, but to say the only thing that still mattered. You didn't lose me when I left for the Navy, I said quietly. You lost me when you decided I was only worth what I could give you. Then I opened the door and walked out. The hallway was just as quiet as before. But I wasn't the same person who'd stood there hours earlier. For the first time in years, there was no question left in me. No uncertainty. No quiet hope I'd been too afraid to admit I was still holding on to. Just clarity, and beneath it something else. Peace. Real peace, the kind that doesn't come from fixing what's broken, but from finally accepting that some things were never meant to be fixed at all. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me off from that apartment, that noise, that whole version of my past, I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. I felt for the first time in a long time completely free.